Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to our general policy meeting for, what's that, June 11th, 2026. Thank you all for being here. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, we have our adoption of the agenda.
Move adoption of the
Second.
agenda.
Motion second. Anyone else? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. With Commissioner Eastman absent.
That's all.
It feels like more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chairs.
Oh, yeah, that's what it is.
We're unbalanced. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, we have the approval of minutes from the May 14th, 2026 meeting with the recommendation of General Policy Committee approved the minutes from the May 14th, 2026.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second to adopt the minutes as printed and distributed. Anyone, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Commissioner Eastman absent. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, we're on to our discussion items for the afternoon. 2026-427 property tax reform update with the recommendation of the General Policy Committee. Received a presentation on the property tax constitutional amendment CS-HJR 1-F approved for the November 3rd, 2026 statewide ballot and its projected impact on the city of Gainesville.
Mr. Manager.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if you recall, last week, all time blends together, during our budget workshop, I think right before we went into the workshop, we had heard that the legislature had passed the ballot initiative. During the discussion, the commission directed us to bring back an informational presentation to this GPC so we can talk about the ballot referendum and its implications for our largest revenue source, which is ad valorem tax revenue. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Ramos, who will walk us through the presentation, and we're all here to answer any questions you have.
Very good. Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Robbins.
Good afternoon, Cynthia Ramos, Executive Chief of Staff. Today's presentation will walk you through the property tax reform legislation that passed in Special Session F and what it means for the city's budget. This is an informational packet and presentation, and no action is requested from the City Commission at this time. The goal is for us to have and leave here with a clear understanding of what passed, what it does to the city's largest revenue source, and what staff is already doing about it before it reaches the November ballot. We'll cover the measures, the dollars, how the city compares to its neighbors, and the questions that are still open, as well as any questions you all may have. So on March 27th, the governor called Special Session F, built around a statewide push to lower homeowner property taxes. During the session, several competing measures narrowed down to two: the constitutional amendment, House Joint Resolution 1F, and its implementing bill, Senate Bill 4F. An earlier Senate version, Senate Joint Resolution 2F, was set aside. On June 2nd, both measures passed both chambers, and the amendment is now certified to the November 3rd ballot, where it needs 60% approval from the voters to pass. This was a pretty quick process that occurred in the midst of us preparing for the fiscal year 27 budget workshops. And while we're still working on those numbers so that we can determine impacts for future fiscal years, what is certain is that for the city, if the ballot passes, this will reduce the city's single largest revenue source significantly. What the legislature passed comes in two parts. On the left, the constitutional amendment changes two things about how homes are taxed. First is the homestead exemption. That's the part of the home's value that the city can't tax. For the city and the county portion of the bill, not the school portion, it goes from $50,000 today to $150,000 in tax year 2027 and $250,000 in tax year 2028. After that, it rises a little each year with inflation, and the school portion keeps its $25,000 exemption. Second is that properties that aren't someone's main home, like businesses and rentals, have an annual limit on how much their taxable value can go up. That limit drops from 10% to 5%, and New Florida residents now have to wait 5 years before they qualify for an exemption. The amendment also tells the legislature to set a schedule down the road to eliminate homestead property taxes entirely.
We have a couple of quick questions.
Yep.
Mr. Chestnut.
Excuse me, thank you. So 5 years now as opposed to how long before did they have to wait to
I
qualify?
believe it's immediate.
Immediately?
Right? Like, the question is if new Florida residents qualify immediately. They don't, under the new proposal. Currently, I think it's immediate, Commissioner, but we can
Okay,
confirm
all
that
right,
for you.
that's interesting,
Right.
okay, thank you.
Again, Commissioner Chestnut, Commissioner Hinkle?
So the existing 50,000 homestead exemption, would that still apply to new residents, or would new residents get nothing until 5 years?
I believe it's nothing until 5 years. Or-
They still get the 50 right now.
So they'll still get the 50 right now, and then they won't qualify for the additional until after 5 years.
All right, thank you.
So, is that only new residents to, so only people moving from outside Florida, or if I move from Ocala to Gainesville and buy a house, does that qualify?
We can ask for clarification on that.
Because that seems like that is a very serious Gainesville question, because there's a not small number of folks moving up from Miami-Dade and Broward to Rockville County. So I would assume that they can transfer their homestead here.
Within Florida.
It's
without
within Florida.
Outside. There has been, I think, some discussion, question about whether you have to own property or you can just essentially reside in Florida, during for that 5 years prior to being qualifying for the exemption.
I'm not sure that they can restrict interstate commerce like that either, but,
It's Florida.
okay, they can throw it out there, but I'm not sure they can end up doing it, so. All right, thank you.
So the amendment also tells the legislature to set a schedule down the road to eliminate homestead property taxes entirely. And on the right is the implementing bill, which is Senate Bill 4F, and it sets the rules. It changes how the city's tax rate cap is set, which we'll talk about more in slide 6. It doesn't restrict how the city can spend its revenue, and it lifts the word limit on the ballot, how the ballot question is written.
Hang on
Okay,
a second.
all right, so in lifting the 75-word limit, does it do that for local governments as well? If we put an issue on the ballot, are we no longer limited to 75 words?
I believe it's just for this particular ballot measure, but I'll refer to the city
All
attorney
right,
for
do we have
that.
an idea, do we have the language? We don't know what the language looks like.
It's in
The
It's in
ballot,
here.
yeah.
On what page? I just want to see how long it is. Oh, I'll wait for her to get to it. It's not, yeah, I figured it's going to be very wordy. That's what I'm trying to see.
page 19 and
All right.
20 of what I have here.
I'll wait for you to get to it. Thank you.
Oh, not the slideshow, I mean the actual bill.
Yeah, it's in the actual bill.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, which we can get you a copy of it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Do we refer to the language anywhere in the presentation, or is this it?
The ballot language?
Yeah.
No, it's not in the presentation.
So, Mr. Attorney, do you want to read that to us?
Sure. I'm trying to see where it ends.
I'm sorry for the indirect language. Would you please read that to us?
All right, at the end it says, "Be it further resolved that the following statement be placed on the ballot." Then in all caps, constitutional amendment, Article 7, Sections 4, 6, and 9, Article 12. Save our homes from excessive property taxes, which I presume that's all the title. Then this amendment benefits Florida taxpayers by exempting homestead properties from taxation, exempts the first $250,000 of a homestead's value from taxation for all levies other than school district levies, and requires, through general law, a schedule for full elimination. Ensuring funding for core services requires local governments to use remaining property taxes solely for core public needs, including public safety, education and schools, infrastructure, and natural resources. Protecting small businesses limits future property tax assessments on businesses. Ensuring fairness for Florida residents requires any person who establishes Florida residency after January 1st, 2027 to maintain a Florida residency for 5 years prior to receiving the increased homestead exemption. If approved, the amendment would take effect on January 1st, 2027. That's what it says verbatim. I presume that was all written prior to the late amendments, because it doesn't seem to fit the bill that was actually passed.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And so my question about that, and I may just not understand, but the title is part of it, correct?
Generally, with ballot initiatives, there's a limit, a word limit for the title, then a word limit for the body or the question. I think it's 25 and 75, but I'm not positive about the 25.
So who defines excessive?
The legislature, the courts,
Right, I feel like.
the courts interpreting what the legislature has said.
Right. That seems like low-hanging fruit, frankly.
I'm sure there'll be a wealth of challenges.
So when those, well, we would go through this and then we can talk about actions. Go ahead, Ms. Ramos, I'm sorry.
Okay, the next slide is the fiscal exposure. This slide puts a picture to the changes and the dollars behind them. Property tax is the city's largest source of funding. In fiscal year '26, we estimate that it's about $77.5 million, just under half of the city's $162 million general fund. The city's millage is 6.7297 mils, which works out to about $6.73 for every $1,000 of taxable value across approximately 17,900 homes. When the property appraiser applies the bigger exemption to the county's official 2025 property tax values, here's what happens. First, in tax year 2027, the city's budget year, fiscal year 2028, at the $150,000 level, the city loses just about $9 million. That's about $1.34 billion of property tax value that used to be taxed and now won't be. Next, in tax year 2028, which is the city's fiscal year 2029, at $250,000 of an exemption, the loss grows to $12.6 million, or $1.87 billion in value. Another way to picture it or measure it against the city's entire general fund is that loss grows from about 5.5% to 7.8%. Measured against property tax alone, it's even larger, about 11.6% to 16.3%.
So those numbers and the percentages are based on current valuations?
On tax year 2025 valuations.
Right, so by the time we get there, by the time we get to fiscal '28, with 27 valuations, it will be more than indicated.
Yes.
Yeah.
Assuming there's growth in the role.
Yes.
And the most important takeaway today is on this slide, that this is just not a one-time cut. It grows, and it grows for 4 reasons. First, it grows by design. It goes from $9 million to just under $9 million to $12.6 million as the exemption steps up, a 40% jump in a single year. Second, the amount that the city can tax shrinks over time. Tightening that limit on non-homesteaded property from 10% to 5% slows how fast the city's taxable value grows. The Alachua County property appraiser's early estimate of that loss is about $1.9 million per year. Third is that this is headed for full elimination. The amendment directs the legislature to phase homestead taxes out completely, and the property appraiser estimates that would be about $14.2 million by the end point in today's property tax values. Fourth, the tool to recover the lost revenue is limited, and we'll cover that on the next slide. And then one thing to note on this chart is that it uses today's 2025 property tax values to show the loss at the exemption level. So it could change as new tax property values come in. This next slide shows that these property tax value reductions will be hard to absorb by most cities. When cities build their budgets, they usually have a lever in the toolbox, and that's the millage rate, and they can pull that lever if needed. Senate Bill 4F changes how the city's tax rate cap is set by tying that cap to the rollback rate. The rollback rate, for those, just to familiarize everybody, is the rate that would bring in the same amount of property tax revenue as the fiscal year before. So each year that becomes the city's new starting point. To set that rate more than 10% above that starting point, it will take 2/3 or a supermajority vote of the city commission, and to go higher than that, it would be a unanimous vote of the city commission. On the left, you have the property tax reduction that grows year over year. On the right, the usual lever to recover it is locked behind a supermajority, and both are pressing on today's $162 million general fund. What's important to break down too is that the relief reaches different taxpayers differently. Homesteaded owners get the larger exemption directly, the relief that the amendment is designed to deliver. Businesses don't get a homestead exemption, but they do benefit from the tighter assessment cap, which slows how fast their taxable value can grow. So that's a partial benefit. And renters receive no direct benefit from the homestead change. The part that ties it all together is that the relief is uneven, but the effects to the budget are not. These three groups all rely on city services together, so they'll all feel it the same way. Oops. This next slide just shows us how the changes compare locally. To put the city's number into context, this shows what each local government that collects property tax would lose each year at the $250,000 level. Alachua County's 2 countywide taxes take the biggest hits. The county's general tax at about $49 million, and its law enforcement district at $12.74 million. The city is right behind at $12.6 million, the third largest loss of any government affected and the largest of any city in the county.
Mr. Ramos, do we have that by percentage of budget?
Percentage of their budget? We can put it together.
I mean, I know a couple of them off the top of my head. The library district, I believe, is about 22%, a little over 22%, and the Children's Trust is approaching 25%. All right, Mr. Book.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I don't think I have a great understanding of the tighter assessment cap that's on two of the preceding slides, I think. So basically what we're saying is, as taxable value goes up on a property, the limit of what that can be raised as relates to what we're getting in revenue is capped at 5%. Is that accurate?
That's right. Yeah,
Right?
essentially, essentially it lowers how the property appraiser can raise that assessed amount over time, year after year.
Okay. I sort of want to make sure I understood.
And that's for all non-homesteaded property?
Correct. So that includes multifamily, commercial, industrial, everything else that's not, wouldn't otherwise be homestead.
Yeah, and to that point, that's every other property. That's all the properties that we have, right? So that's it. While there is a component of this that potentially could impact just homestead, this relates to all taxable residential property. Okay.
But just to be clear, homestead is already limited to 3% or inflation, whichever is lower. I can't remember which one that was. So like, yes,
Yeah.
homesteaded,
Year to year.
let's say closer to the 3 or something, or what inflation is, as opposed to non, which this would be 5, non-homestead. Got it, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos.
And one more question. So the 5% cap on non-homesteaded properties, that is, I assume, regardless of residency of the owners. Does that go away with a change of property the way it does with like a homesteaded property, like let's say of our homes, it's kind of capped at 3%, but if I sell my house to someone else, they're starting kind of over with that. So does that work the same with commercial property, or is it that property's locked in at that 10%?
I think we would have to look into that, Commissioner, and get back to you.
Yeah, I don't think you can transfer tax benefits with the ownership.
But I knew you can with a homestead the way it is now. I just didn't know what this one meant.
I mean, I'm sure they will try to argue otherwise, but I don't think it should be transferable under normal circumstances.
So, so if we could get an answer on that, and then the same kind of, so my house is capped at 3% unless I do some huge remodel of the house or add on square footage or any of that, and would those same rules apply to commercial properties where there's some threshold at which point the whole thing would be reevaluated?
Okay, we'll look.
It is important to know that there might not be answers to some of these
Oh, sure.
questions.
Yeah.
Not an oracle, like, what did you mean by this? Or,
But that's.
Andrew, I will have you know that the Florida legislature has put this together, and they're not going to do a half-assed job. Also.
No matter what their numbers say.
Yeah.
All right, okay. On this slide, we do want the commission to know hold on, I went one slide ahead. This slide is that we do want to flag an open legal question for the city commission, and we do want to be careful about how it's framed because we are not asserting an outcome here. But the amendment touches Article 7, Section 9 of the state constitution. The enacted text permits funding municipal operations and locally approved expenditures. Separately, the ballot summary describes the remaining taxes funding core public needs. The question of whether these two framings narrow how the city may spend its remaining revenue is under review. Because we're waiting on that guidance, the impacts that we've discussed here do not assume any use restriction beyond the firm property tax revenue loss. So the takeaway here is that the property tax revenue loss, we sort of have a good idea of what the impacts are going to be and what that's going to look like, but we still aren't sure about the other parts of these questions that remain unanswered, specifically about what core public service means as we go forward.
But to be clear, once again, this is, everything we're talking about here is on the ballot, number one, in November. It is not decided yet. And number two, would not go into effect until next budget year. So we're not talking about the budget that we're currently working on. We're talking about the FY '28 budget.
Yes and no. So the fiscal component, it is not until FY '28. The use restriction is effective January 1, 27.
Okay. All right.
Clarification.
4 budgets that every city and county in Florida have already adopted, correct? Yes, okay.
On this slide, we want the commission to know that there's additional exposure worth noting, and this was raised in a letter from the Florida Government Finance Officers Association. As the exemptions grow, the amount of property tax value that the city can tax gets smaller, but the city's existing debt doesn't shrink with it, it stays the same. Having a smaller tax base carrying the same debt can put the pressure on the city's borrowing costs and credit rating over time. So this isn't an immediate alarm, but it is a real thing that staff is monitoring as we go forward, as part of the full picture. Just to get back to the overall timeline, the governor called a special session on March 27th. The ballot was approved on June 2nd. The statewide vote is scheduled for November 3rd, and it needs a 60% voter approval. If approved, the $150,000 exemption, the 5% cap, and the 5-year residency rule take effect on January 1st, 2027, and the first budget year that the city could feel these impacts is fiscal year 2028. The $250,000 exemption follows on January 1st, 2028, and that affects the city's fiscal year 2029 budget.
Did he call the special session on March 27th or May 27th?
Could it be May
I
27th?
think
We
it
can
was May
confirm.
27th, yeah.
It was May.
That matters in the long run. No.
And so what staff is doing, we recognize that this is a significant impact to the city's budget, and so we want you to know what we're doing to learn more about it and prepare the city for any impacts. First, we're monitoring the legislation. We're tracking the implementing general law and the full implementation schedule as they develop. Second, we're maintaining the city's in-house revenue model so that we can continue to run scenarios on what our future revenue projections could look like. Third, we're looking at how we continue the fiscal year 2027 budget development process with eyes wide open for fiscal year 2028 scenario planning, which will be the first year of real impact if the ballot passes. And lastly, we're coordinating with the Alachua County property appraiser, the city state lobbyist, and the city attorney on any remaining questions that we have. And lastly, because this is now a ballot measure, there are communications rules that we have to follow. To put it simply, just the facts used to be a safe harbor. It isn't anymore. The city can make information available and answer questions, but it can't spend public dollars pushing messages out to voters, even if they're factual. The left side of this slide is what the city may do. It may post factual information, post forums, report official actions, and make printed materials available. The right side is what it may not do, and it cannot use public funds to send communications to voters. One important distinction, though, is that as an official action, the city commission may adopt a resolution and take a position with the legislature. Legislator-facing communications may take a position, but voter-facing documents may not. And so with this presentation, we have shown you that this is a deep cut that grows over time. The city's tool to manage it is constrained, and the tax base flattens over time, limiting new property tax revenue growth. What this ultimately means for the city is a tighter revenue picture ahead, and staff is currently focusing on finalizing the development of the fiscal year '27 budget, and we will continue to provide the commission with analysis and updates as the implementing law and the unresolved questions are answered. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Mr. Bowe.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So on this slide about, you know, what we can do and what we cannot do, can you give me an example? What would be a legislative-facing communication versus a voter-facing communication, like a concrete example of what that looks like?
I believe I'm going to lean on the city attorney
One
for
is
that
you
one.
talking to to the legislature, to like the local delegation, for instance. Another is talking to the voters directly.
So if we at the dais are passing a resolution, that's okay here, right, according to this. Any communications that we have at the dais is appropriate. Sending out releases, like we often send out releases on what we've done that week or our accomplishments or efforts or messages.
We can post information on our website. We can have information available as is in the backup for community groups or individuals that are interested. But we are limited in what we can essentially push out proactively using public dollars.
Yeah, that'll be one, probably, Mr. Attorney, that the nuances of that will probably need to be really well defined. Thank you.
Commissioner Chestnut.
However, if we have local organizations that request information from us, for example, I can see a lot of people requesting what your property tax is paid for. Would we be able to disseminate or give that to them, print it for them? If they're coming to us, we're not going to them. Mr.
I'm
Attorney?
sorry, I didn't hear your question. I was
My
thinking back to what
question is-
Ben presented, just if I may. A notion of a legislative communication, I think a resolution, for example, that may be allowed, that would be allowable, I think, prior to the ballot question being adopted. Once the ballot question is adopted, it has been, that sort of advocacy isn't permissible either. You can't pass a resolution talking about how horrible you think something is,
Right.
and then publish that out and use resources to do that any more than you could do any other advertisement type matter. That ship has sailed once the act passes and it's transmitted to the Secretary of State.
So are you saying we can't pass a resolution saying we don't think this is a good idea?
Right.
Right. Not
What you,
But individually, not using the resources of the city.
absolutely.
If I'm sitting in my house on my social media account and using all stuff that I individually pay for, I still have some limited First Amendment rights. Is that accurate?
Elected officials may express opinions on a ballot proposal or ballot question at any time, provided no public funds are used to send those opinions directly to voters or to convert them into a paid political advertisement. You're not limited when you act in your personal capacity without expending the resources of the public.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt there, Commissioner Chestnut.
And to your point, we can produce materials as we have in terms of factual handouts, but we can't go and hand them out. We can't mail them to voters. We can make them available for people that are interested. And in the backup to this item is a presentation that's oriented to public groups that may be interested in talking about this or sharing information. This is there's a separate presentation in the backup that's more oriented more to like a general kind of group. And there's a neighbor handout that's information that largely just talks about factual information about the city's ad valorem tax revenue and the potential impacts. But we couldn't send out a mailer to residents. We couldn't go and walk and knock on doors and hand out materials. The city cannot, correct? The city cannot.
That's fine, thank you.
Commissioner Gill.
As far as whatever personal comments I have on what a bad ideas may or may not be, I'm still allowed to see that, whether we're at a commission meeting, whether I'm out in the world, whether I'm in, right?
I think that's fair. And again, what you need to remember is, are you using public resources to do that?
I guess my question is, like, so if they are recording me at a city commission meeting, and that recording is available to anybody on the internet watching it, is that considered like an expenditure of public resources, or is that just a regular course of business and just the resources are expended regardless?
I think I'd be mindful of those sort of accusations, because even if it's something that you can do, you may not want to be in a position where we're trying to defend that. At any time, should be making advertisements, what are called. And again, after it becomes a ballot question, I think that's the stricter limitations come into play. But you can think in terms of what you can do and what you can't do. Once it becomes a ballot question, I think, things you can't do. You can't use public funds to send any communication to voters about the ballot question, even if they're purely factual, which is a real change from the past, I think. You can't use public funds to pay for political advertisements advocating for or against a ballot question, even if the communication is not sent directly to voters. For example, posted on a website. That's a prohibition once it becomes a ballot question. Things you can do, you can post verifiable factual information on official city websites and social media, but you may not send it directly to voters through any use of public funds. You can host and participate in public meetings, town halls, forums, and media events to answer questions. But again, you're going to want to keep your answers fact-based and not be overtly advocating. You can respond to public inquiries with factual information.
If we are invited, I'm invited to go to a forum to talk about this, and there are no public resources, I'm not driving a city car there, I'm not using city resources, I'm going to say what I think.
The city's not hosting that event.
Right.
The city can't host an event such as that. But if you're invited to an event put on by a group, or if, as a candidate for office, you are hosting it in your capacity as a candidate, that's not a city function.
Right. So as long as the city isn't doing it, it's not a city employee other than members of the commission who aren't, or whose weird status, we can speak freely.
Yes,
As long as we're not using city resources.
correct.
Commissioner Engel, did you have more
Yeah,
there, or
good.
did you want to finish what you're saying?
But there's other things that you can do. Again, respond to public inquiries with fact-based information. Again, and there can be a gray line sometimes between what's advocacy or fact-based, because sometimes the choosing in which facts you offer can be perceived as being advocacy, so you always got to be mindful of that. You can report on official city actions related to property tax issues in an accurate, fair, and impartial manner. We routinely report on what we spend tax dollars on, and that still remains fine. You can produce brochures, flyers, printed materials explaining property tax facts and making these available to the public to receive or take away when visiting City Hall or public forums or other places, provided they are not sent to voters at any public expense, and provided none of these amounts to a political advertisement paid for with political funds. What's a political advertisement, is your question? That's defined as a paid expression in a communications medium, i.e. broadcasting stations, newspapers, magazines, outdoor advertising facilities, printers, direct mail, advertising agencies, the internet, telephone companies, whether radio, television, newspaper, magazine, periodical, campaign, literature, direct mail, or display by means other than the spoken word and direct conversation, which expressly advocates the election or defeat of a candidate or the approval or rejection of an issue. So again, the old guidelines that we went by where fact-based was okay and advocacy was not in the use of public funds still holds true, but there's more limitations now that even some facts-based things can't be done. It's the old way plus more restrictions.
Commissioner Willis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So can we respond to the public in our email, our city email?
In a fact-based manner.
Okay, but that is use of a public, fund. It's not like, I don't think we're charged per email, but it's a system that's been built. with public
Yes,
funds.
you're right, that is using public resources.
But
So
if it's
in
an
any
inquiry-
response you have, that someone inquires about this referendum, a response through using public resources, such as your public email, would not be appropriate to advocate one way or the other, to respond with fact-based matters. The city currently receives X number of dollars and X percent of its budget through ad valorem taxation. If this measure were to pass, that would become this amount or this number. The types of things the city does with these funds are X, Y, and Z.
Okay,
The
what
types
about-
of things, choices the city will have to make in the
Because
future.
often what people ask is, what will be cut and how will you fill the budget hole? Because some of our voters are, they're very with
Sure.
it. They understand that, like, some of them understand this isn't just going to be like this magic. Oh, they don't. That they're not going to pay the tax. The city's going to have less, and nothing changes, right? So, but am I allowed to say, well, if it were me a year from now looking at the budget, I would cut this, or I'd raise, I don't know, the fee to have a lemonade stand. Like, am I allowed to say either this could be a way, because, a couple months ago when people were kind of asking this, they said, how would you do this? I answered, I said, fire assessment. That's one way that, that is not an ad valorem tax. It's not property tax, so it is something that the lever would still be there, as we roughly understood, the proposals in the legislature. So can that is not it's a fact of what I think, but can I say, this is how I would do it?
The key is you're not advocating for or against the measure. And while you'll be discussing the facts of what your intentions may be, if given a different landscape to work in, that's not necessarily advocating. You'll have to be disciplined, because it'll be tempting to talk about the things that you may like that may not be money available for. You may want to phrase that in terms of advocating for or against a measure. And that's where, using public resources, you're going to have to be very careful.
Okay.
Now, if you are like, I'll come meet with you separately outside of using public resources, that's a different matter. You're still,
Right.
American, you still have your rights to discuss these matters in your personal capacity. The real catch here is advocacy and be careful with the use of public funds to make sure it's fact-based only, and limitations on how you can disseminate even fact-based information.
Okay. Thank you so much.
It's discipline. It's really
So,
hard.
if somebody emails me and says, how should I vote on this? Because they will. Is there any reason that I can't write them back and say, I'm not going to be able to answer this question using city resources, but I will contact you via this email address. Please be aware that's on the way.
I think that would be appropriately transparent to them, is that I am prohibited from using city resources or funds to respond regarding, in any advocacy measure. I'll be happy to discuss it with you personally as neighbor to neighbor, and then do so. But again, it's more important than ever not to accidentally use one method of communication rather than the other. It happens routinely, and then usually we can cure it, and it just makes things more difficult. But in this context, especially in the environment, I would anticipate coming forward. And as you know, I'm always a bit paranoid. I always think everyone's out to get us. But I would urge you to be extra careful about anything that can be interpreted as being advocacy-based when you're using public resources in this building, using your public, I don't know if you have cell phones, or using your email addresses or the computers or your office space. And these are restrictions that you're familiar with from basic campaigning also,
I was going to say, we should use the same discipline that we use for re-election campaigns.
Right. And in some ways, the commission may be better equipped to understand these limitations than maybe some city employees and department heads and so forth. That's a message we may want to make sure we convey to them, to be careful, because they have friends contacting them as well about governmental issues and ballot initiatives, as we all do.
If we might get a 1 or 2 sentence disclaimer and make that available to all city workers to say, here's language that you could use that is permissible to say, I can't talk to you about this right now, but I've talked to you in the neighborhood. something like that. If we could get that language, that would be helpful to me, and then we can disseminate that to.
I know in every election season, the manager's office, past managers have typically issued a memo that reminds people about campaign activities in the workplace. Not intended to dissuade people from participating in political activities, but to remind them that when you're in your official capacity using official funds, you have limitations. That seems like it'd be appropriate to add it to that.
We're planning on doing that already.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I figured,
that's precisely where I was going, is exactly what you said is, guidelines that are short and succinct and concrete for both us and the city staff would be helpful. We don't want anyone to run awry of that, but we're not operating in a vacuum either. I mean, every city and every county is going through this exact same conversation. As you said, some of it's interpretive, some not expecting answers for all the questions, as we know. I was thinking about some of the organizations that overlap with some of the way that we operate. For example, the League of Cities, or the Alachua League of Cities in particular. And I even think about lobbyists, because lobbyists was on a side. Well, lobbyists is directly funded by the city. So why don't it is now, I would be interested in how are those, can the Alachua League of Cities take a position? How do we expect our lobbyists are supposed to take a position when we say we can't use funds? Well, lobbyists are in fact subsidized. So these are kind of some of the things running around, but as it relates to providing us some guidance in writing, so we're all under the same rules of engagement, I think that would be very helpful.
And your lobbyists take positions, Mr. Mayor, in terms of laws that are pending and urging legislators how to respond, not once the law is passed and the ballot initiative is set. The world changes a bit when that happens, and that happened just, was it last week?
Yeah, last week.
So, and again, in terms of the Alachua County League, I'd have to think, I don't know that they'd be able to, all of their funds, I presume, are public funds. I don't know that they'd be able to stand in as a proxy to do anything in an advocacy-related manner. The Board of League of Cities
I'm
is.
not sure the Alachua County League.
I don't know what they
has
are.
funds, because it's
I was going to say,
Okay.
I think there's no funds as it relates to that, but that's really not the question. The question is,
Okay.
these are organizations that band together, that utilize typically elected officials and leadership in positions, and they may take a position. The question is, in this case, those, because you would talk about other organizations, there's probably a very big difference between organizations that are purely nonprofit or 501(c) versus organizations that often take political stances, I think.
Well, in the Florida League of Cities, Mr. Mayor, you'll find is, they were ready for this, and they've produced a wealth of information. And, the information that's been presented to you here by the manager's offices and Ms. Ramos is fantastic. My guess is they probably consulted with the League of Cities information, because it's all hands on deck now in terms of making sure people, again, we're all in this together, what we can do and what the proper information is.
You good, Commissioner Cook?
Thank you, sir.
And so maybe the next handout is perhaps what we can use, or what the public can request, what your property tax is paid for.
We have that in this agenda item. We have all of those attachments, like a neighbor handout, a presentation that covers.
Okay.
Yeah, that's in the backup as well. So it's similar to what we've produced here, just factual.
So any faith-based organization could call City Hall, or call a city commissioner and get this information.
That's public record at this point.
Yeah, okay,
It's online right now.
Yeah, it's on.
okay. Thank you.
And we are planning, to the extent that we can by law, putting some tax information on our website as well. We'll just consult with Mr. Dee's office on making sure we're solid there.
And Mr. Mayor, that is the kind of, cooperation right out of the bat. We started, we received communication from the county's office about what they're projecting or presenting, received information from the Florida League of Cities. That's a big part of what we'll try to do here, is help coordinate and work with our sister governments and other organizations to make sure that we stay on the straight and narrow, but also explain factually just what it is that our local governments do with our public funds.
So while we have a couple of members of the library board.
That's what I wanted, that was my next
And
question.
I'm sorry to put you all on the spot, but do you have a feel for what percentage of the library budget is ad valorem taxes? My guess is about 99%.
I think so.
I think it, well, I'm looking at the budget right now, it's 27 million for FY '25 through '6, the total, and I think it's only 200,000 comes from, 200,000 or 300,000 comes from other
The
sources.
library,
Or there's some state, there's a small portion of state funds, so I think it's somewhere in the realm of 98%. So that, you know, you're right, about 22% of this year's budget, that's what that equivalent $6 million is.
Well, I think the same thing probably for the Children's Trust.
except they're closer to 25%, but
Okay.
yes.
2.9 million on the slide is
Right.
potential impact.
And I can't imagine that they have any other source of revenue because of the way the organization is put together. I don't know how you run the satellite libraries.
We have one in every city.
Right. Currently, we have one in every city.
Currently, we do.
I don't know how you run satellite locations if you lose 22% of your budget.
That's right.
That's why I wanted to ask, since, you know, Commissioner Chestnut and Commissioner Duncan-Walker, I know that we won't know this until November, and then by then they'll start having to look at the following year's budget. And I don't know who sit on the library. I assume it'll be y'all, that sits y'all going into next year. But I'm concerned, I want us to fight for our libraries that are in the city, because, I mean, that kind of money, I mean, that probably means they can't fund future expansion in Jonesville, which is, you know, a big growth area, but even, you know, so I don't know, I can't remember how much of their capital dollars they're allowed to change their mind on. And I know there's a chunk that goes towards a capital fund for future. But I want to fight for our libraries if this comes to be that they're going to lose $6 million. So I just want to start that conversation now.
Yeah.
Because we're going to need them. We're
We're
going to need them.
buildings, good status.
Well, yeah, there you go, exactly. You definitely could
You
staff
can't
it.
put books on the shelf, but you got a building.
Yeah, thanks.
Commissioner Duncan-Walker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I can say that Ms. Livingston and I have had a conversation as recently as this morning about this very matter. And one of the things is we were just throwing out, you know, some of the things that she might have to look at. And we did not run the gamut of everything, but one of the worst case scenarios obviously would be literally having to cut way back on the hours. So you may have a situation where we now have libraries that are not operating 7 days a week, but just a couple of days out of the week that libraries would be accessible to the public. I would totally love to have a conversation with Ms. Livingston, and perhaps it might be amenable to us here to bring her in, to have a conversation and see, you know, since there is the concern about what we want to see for the libraries within the city, just to kind of hear what it is, and I'm pretty sure that she's not fully baked on everything that she's having to consider, but she is starting to think. And like I said, just this morning, she and I were talking about what some of those possibilities might look like.
Mr. Attorney, do you, off the top of your head, do you think it's permissible for us to invite her to her and the
Children's
executive
Trust
officer,
and Children's Trust.
to come speak to us at a general policy meeting, for instance, without advocating, just as an opportunity for them to disseminate information?
Your same rules are going to apply
Right.
that we've discussed. I think it's fine. And the only thing I would suggest is I don't know for a fact. I think we have 2 members that are also members of the library board. They may want to discuss with their counsel whether, if library business is going to be discussed,
Right.
if they want to have that notice for them as well. I wouldn't want us to be hosting a subcommittee meeting of the library board
Right.
without making sure their counsel's aware of it and ensures that everything is on the up and up.
Well, under normal sunshine rules, that's, you're not talking about how you would vote on the budgets, so.
Again,
Yes.
an abundance of caution.
Absolutely. Yeah. And these conversations, as Commissioner Book noted, are going to be happening in 411 cities and 67 counties. So,
And as I was mentioning, I do think that it is appropriate and beneficial for us to have open lines of communication, especially on the staff level and the attorney level, with these other sister governments, because we'll all be in sort of the same boat, responding one way or the other to whatever the voters decide.
Commissioner Engel.
So of the couple extra funds that we've got, street station, strong foundations, the
Home spaces.
wall space, public places, those are all like ad valorem or just sales tax, correct? There's not anything special ad valorem tax. If we did do something special, like a general obligation bond or something like that, would that be subject to the same homestead exemptions, or how would some device like that work, or is that?
I mean, the GO bond would be pledged from ad valorem tax revenues, that would be, yeah. But that would be, I would have to go to the voters as well.
Right, but I mean, I think, so, say the voters decide like, well, you know, we think it's important to have whatever it is, we have a general obligation bond for. That would be subject to the same homestead exemptions as everything else in those?
Yeah, yeah, because we ultimately would be pledging what we were receiving in terms of ad valorem,
Gotcha.
which will, would be receiving less, so lower our ability to bond as well.
It's the trust from which those bonds will be paid that will be limited
Right.
in the event this were to pass. So, the ability to go forward with general obligation bonds would be, the marketplace wants to make sure they're going to get paid.
Sure.
So that if there's less available, then there's going to be less bonding capacity.
Yeah. Okay.
Madam Clerk, do we have an agenda for the July 23rd GPC meeting? Do we know of anything that we had agreed to discuss that day?
Give me 1 moment.
That'll be our only GPC of July.
Didn't we add, Mr. Mayor, a budget hearing before that?
Yes, their budget hearings
Yeah.
at various times. But if we don't have any huge items on that GPC, if I don't hear any objection, we should perhaps invite the director of the library system and the director of the Children's Trust to
Absolutely.
make a presentation.
And that will follow a library governing board meeting in the morning.
Okay, that's
So
perfect.
that would follow,
Unfortunate.
yeah.
We currently do not have.
Okay, well, without objection, then we'll issue those invitations.
Okay.
All right, is there any public comment on this while we're in a lull? I don't think there's anybody here but staff. Staff are also part of the public, I'm just saying. Okay. Anyone else want to hold forth on this while we have the opportunities?
I would just thank you, staff, for a lot of this information, because it's, the public gets confused by, quickly confused by how we can afford to spend money if the future looks murkier, but it's the general versus, so wild spaces, public places, we spend money out of that, or we spend money out of, stuff that's already in solid waste, and it's good to be able to answer back and say, oh no, those are separate funds, those are collected in different ways, those are not from your property taxes, those are from whatever. So some of this is just a good reminder of how those things are funded. We tend to talk about a smaller portion because we have levers that we have to decide on every year, as opposed to our all funds budget has a whole bunch of different revenue streams. So thank you for doing that, because I think it is good for people to know. The more frankly, I think if the more the voters know, it helps them make a better decision, because they know where a budget comes from, where truly all revenues come from. So thank you, staff, for doing this. Outside of this situation, it's really good for the public. I think that's, the past couple of years have been really, really good about the forward-facing, trying to help people understand, because on social media they ask us immediately, and they probably email y'all, immediately have a question, how can you afford to do this if X, X, or X? And then we say, oh no, that's a different fund. So thank y'all.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think we, Ms. Ramos and our team, I think, as you'll see from the backup, I think we tried to make a presentation that was understandable to the vote, because this is complicated, and if you're not thinking about ad valorem taxes all the time as a resident, it can get confusing quickly. So I guess the only thing I was going to add was we are, we're currently working on the FY '27 budget, and we're moving forward. We'll be scheduling opportunities to meet with you all. We've gotten decrement packages from all of the departments at 10 and 15% cut levels. We're working on those and meeting with you right after your recess. We anticipate sending packets to you all to start reviewing the week of June 22nd is what we're looking at. My intent is after the July 16th meeting, once we set the preliminary millage, my intent is for us to try to get done with this year's budget so we can pivot quickly and start thinking about and directing resources to figuring out scenarios for if the ballot measure passes, how we can adjust, because it will be a significant adjustment. And that's a great understatement in terms of not just this next year, but the following year and years to come. So,
Commissioner Walker and then Commissioner Book.
Oh, no, I was stretching.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't stretching.
I was.
It's interesting you mentioned that, Mr. Manager, because I was just thinking how confusing it is to voters when they're thinking about what's potentially on the ballot in November and the potential budget impacts, and the fact that we're currently talking about an October 1 budget with essentially a 12 million, plus deficit, and I think that is going to be very, very difficult to message accurately when kind of sound bites and cliches kind of dominate, what someone says. So to the extent that we're able to do that, we do need to make sure what you just talked about, a clear delineation between this budget we're talking about right now is different and distinct with its own shortages and underfunded areas and things that we're trying to do, and the fact that this we're talking about has ramifications years going forward. But we have to talk about it now, so I think that will be really delicate and probably an expert level of planning in how to message that out and make sure that those are clear to people. And they're going to overlap, unfortunately, in timelines. I will say thank you very much for sending. I know you sent it to us, but the internal memorandums that have gone out that tell everybody, look, this is anxiety producing and it's problematic, and yes, we need to look at potential decrement packages is absolutely necessary. And then even just as important was your letter to external funded partners telling them, prepare, please.
Be prepared.
Be prepared and do it now. That's what we're doing, I think was really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Book. Mr. Chestnut.
Thank you. Is this the second or third ballot issue that's been on the ballot that requires 60% to pass?
Mr. Every constitutional amendment would require 60% affirmative to pass.
No, that's not what I'm asking. That's not
Do we know what number?
Yeah.
Oh, for this upcoming
Yeah,
ballot, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's not what I'm asking.
Yes, ma'am.
I heard it might be number 3.
Is it 3?
but I'm not
Okay,
sure
all
if
right.
that's-
One was marijuana. That failed, I think.
I think they list the legislative put on ones first. That's what I thought,
Oh,
but
yeah,
I
they
could
do.
be, so that's what I'll.
Anyway, yeah. I'm just trying to remember how many have been on the ballot.
Oh, in the
Because
past,
we
in
moved
past
from,
years.
we moved from 50% to 60%.
Oh, but that's been a while. So
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the recreational marijuana is the most recent ballot initiative.
And
that-
abortion
that failed.
also.
Yeah, abortion, that's right.
Okay.
I think it was like hunting rights or something that passed.
Yes. Did you go hunt bears on private
Sure,
property?
bears.
That's not your own? Yeah. Right, so I know that this is confusing to everyone. We have unanswered questions here. So if you're watching at home and you really can't get your head around this, you are not alone. There will be an enormous amount of information over the next few months that will ramp up probably the 4th week of August and after Labor Day, far more than it will this summer. But you're going to see a lot of information about this. You won't have a chance to vote until ballots go out for the November election. So this is not going to be on your August ballot. This will be on your November ballot, unless a court strikes it down. And frankly, there's some questionable language in the language itself. And I don't know if the legislature can go back and have another special session to fix it. They have a lot of special sessions that we pay for.
It hardly seems special at all anymore.
Exactly. They're so regular, not even special. But they do cost us a lot of money. And somehow that is not wasted. But at any rate, if you're watching and you're confused by all this, so is everybody else, including the people who passed this. If you go back and watch the legislative discussions about this, they were confused about what they were voting on. And if you ask multiple legislators who voted on this, even the ones who voted for it, you are likely to get different interpretations of what they believe they voted for. I would suggest that perhaps that is instructive. Everything that is online right now in the backup that we have talked about today, the presentations that we went through and other presentations we did not, you are welcome to download and disseminate them as you will. There is as much complete information there about how this affects the city of Gainesville as an organization and the taxes you might or might not pay to the city of Gainesville. What we do not include in there is some of the discussion we had about the library district and about the Children's Trust. I can't tell you exactly how this affects other cities. There is good information out there about that. I can't tell you exactly how this affects Alachua County or the other 66 counties, but there is good information out there about that. The way I like to approach things, if I don't understand a ballot question, I am likely to vote no on it. But that's just me. You may not feel the same way. Thank you to staff for putting great information together in a short period of time. Thank you for the work that you will be doing in the future on this, almost certainly. And I am more than happy to discuss this, as I'm sure my colleagues are, individually to folks outside our City Hall offices till the cows come home. So, having said all that, Madam Clerk, what's next?
Mr. Mayor, we have
Let me ask one more time. Anybody? Okay. All right.
member comment.
Member comment? All right. I will see you all next Thursday, if not before. Thank you.